Welcome, everybody. If you're watching live, as always, please feel free to ask any questions along the way. If you think you might like to join me yourself, please do get in contact. My details on the channel's About page. On the 13th, no, I was about to say on the 13th of December. It's not the 13th of December. On the 24th of January, we'll be talking with Joe Grand, aka Kingpin. But today's guest is Anna Barela. Hello, Anne. How are you?
Hi. Good.
Good. I realized just now, as I was saying it live to everybody, that I didn't confirm how to say your surname. I apologize.
No problem. It's Barela.
Barela, thank you. So, hello, how are you? And would you like to give a quick introduction on who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name's Ann Barela. I'm currently an electrical engineering consultant for Adafruit Industries, a small boutique electronics company in Manhattan, New York. And I have various roles, including moderating the learning system, helping with their media presence, and publishing the Python for Microcontrollers newsletter.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. As always, I like to start with people's backgrounds and how they got to today. So if you're happy, could we sort of start off as your child you, what you got up to and what you did back then?
Well, like a lot of children, I like to take things apart and put them together. and my mother was keen on encouraging that, bless her soul. So I knew I had some proclivity there, and the prevalent electronics company in the States was Radio Shack.
Mm-hmm.
So they would send catalogs and you can get parts and kits and stuff. So I would tinker with that. Then when I was about 15, in school, they offered electronics class.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So for 3 years, I was able to learn electronics formally and use a slide rule. That wasn't as useful, but
can you give us a feel for what electronics means for you back then, or meant for you back then?
Well, they were teaching a lot of AC electronics. We would light up light bulbs and use switches and that kind of thing, serial and parallel and all kinds of stuff. But I was always interested in digital electronics, and that's where Radio Shack, I would buy chips and follow along in the little hobbyist books and put things together and make little lights blink, which is popular now as opposed to making light bulbs light up. So maybe I made a good choice.
Fantastic. Very good. So you were aiming then sort of with your electronics, you had some idea of where you wanted to go, I guess. Can you just sort of fill us in a bit about that as well?
Sure. Between that and taking computer programming in my senior year, I knew I really wanted to get into this digital electronics. So even though my high school counselor said, well, aim realistically, I wanted to go to a really good school. So I applied to Caltech and MIT, and both of them said my test scores weren't quite high enough. But I got this, hey Liz, I got a brochure from a college closer, Whitman College, and they said they have a joint program with Caltech. You go 3 years to Whitman, 2 years to Caltech, and they both give you a degree. And I said, sure, that gets me where I want to go.
Awesome.
So, I packed my bags and went to Walla Walla, Washington for 3 years.
And what did you study while you were there? Obviously, we got sort of a taste for what it might be, but can you give us more specifics?
Sure. It's a liberal arts college, so you have to take English and history and that type of thing. But mainly for my degrees, mathematics and physics with a little chemistry thrown in. So, and I took about as much computer science as they had. I was actually working in their computer center because I already had some knowledge from high school. So
working as in employed and helping rather than rather than as a student?
Yeah, minimum wage, of course. But
What were you doing? Do you mind me asking?
I was doing some programming, and then later on, I did some tutoring, student teaching, helping other students during their lab classes.
Awesome. Okay.
So then after 3 years, I transferred to Caltech in Pasadena and dove into the deep end of electrical engineering.
And was that what you were hoping it would be? Did that suit you well?
It was. I mean, it was a kind of a culture shock. I was not doing so well in my first semester electrical engineering class, but I kind of pulled myself together, let's say. So I found it interesting. I loved they had courses on microprocessors and programming and assembly language, and it's like, I just ate it up.
Awesome.
Learned C there.
Okay.
But they had some like early IBMs that you could check out my senior year, which was helpful, so I could have like a computer rather than go use. They had like this ancient mainframe or something to let the students play on, so we didn't hurt the real computers or something. But I built a VT100 clone, a speech synthesizer, and
it always amazes me looking back. You've obviously got speech synthesis today, which is going to be very different to the early days of it. But it amazes me how good some of it was back then.
It really was back in the 80s. They had some really excellent chips. Texas Instruments was one, and I kind of miss it. I mean, really, to get the same level of complexity, they're just going to the internet with a voice and then coming back with some sort of canned prompt, and it's not quite the same.
Very good. Sorry, do you mind continuing sort of the projects you worked on? Just give us an idea.
Sure. At Tech, and I worked on an acoustic modem too. I caught the interest of my teaching assistant in class, and he hooked me up with the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So I was able to work the summer in between junior and senior year, and then during the senior year on stuff that they were working on, and it turned out to be synthetic aperture radar processing. They initially were sending airplanes up with these radars and scanning the surface of the Earth, and at the wavelengths they were using, it could kind of peer through trees and light soil and give a better idea of what things were there. So they used it to find some of the trade routes in the Far East that, between the Middle East and China, under the sand and through the canopies in the jungles of Central and South America. So
interesting. Yeah.
It was a precursor to flying the same kind of radar on at least 2 shuttle missions. So it was great fun, and they actually asked if I wanted to stay, but I wasn't that keen on staying in Los Angeles. Probably it would have been a very nice change and would have changed my life, but I accepted an offer at Boeing to do work, which turned out to be on the Strategic Defense Initiative, shooting lasers and stuff in space.
So this was your first job out of uni or college? Yeah, you went straight to Boeing?
Yes.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
So went up to Seattle and started work there, and we were doing, there's the movie War Games, where they have the big screens, and they show the missiles coming up from the US and from Russia and what the damage is and everything. They were doing the same kind of things at Boeing for kind of realsies.
Right. It's scary stuff then. Yeah. Real things in inverted commas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it wasn't quite what I was trained to do at university. They didn't pay all that great. So a coworker one day brought in this ad from the newspaper. I wasn't really looking for a job, but he showed it around and it said, "See the world, meet interesting people, and you don't have to kill them."
That's
This
what the
was
word
the
said in the
military.
newspaper.
Yeah, well, not quite.
Okay.
You know, and seeing the world is something I'd really want to do, and
Yeah.
I didn't want to have to carry a gun to do it.
Okay.
So it turned out it's being in the United States Diplomatic Corps,
Hmm.
and specifically in security engineering. So
Okay.
they provide security to embassies and consulates worldwide, and so it prevents the bad guys from getting into the embassy, hurting people, putting in listening devices, that kind of thing. You really want to keep things to yourself in the embassy because
Yeah.
advanced information might be valuable, or keep people safe so they're not made targets. It's a lot easier to target somebody at a faraway embassy than to come to um, the middle of the United States and try to blow something up.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So this was then a transition from Boeing to Department of State. Fascinating. And I asked earlier if this was kind of somewhat equivalent to GCHQ and some of the stuff they did, but it sounds like not. Can you just sort of fill us in for those who aren't?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't in the thing where it's intelligence gathering.
Mhm.
It was mostly regular security work involving technology with a sprinkling of countermeasures work. So
Okay.
every now and then we would check a facility to see if somebody had infiltrated it with technology and try to find it and pull it
Okay.
out,
We're
whatever.
talking bugs here, are we? That sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the first thing that they did after I was trained, they threw me on a team and we went to Moscow. The Soviets at the time had bugged this new American embassy being built um, rather severely. So during the middle of winter in 1989, we were checking where all that kit might be and trying to take it out and detail it and that kind of thing. So it
Was
was
there
a
any kind of reverse engineering, figuring out how it worked at all, or was it just a matter of detecting, finding, removing kind of thing?
there was some. I mean, the let's see, the boffins in the laboratory would probably really be doing the nitty gritty. But I mean,
Okay.
if we found something, say, and it was connected via cable, and it was up to us to try to figure out what was going on. So,
Right.
but it was a interesting 3 months in the middle of winter. It's bitterly cold, but the positive thing was I saved, excuse me, my the extra money I got for per diem, that kind of thing, and I went on a 2-week tour of England, Scotland, and Wales.
Okay.
That was my
Amazing.
first time in the UK, so
Right.
that was kind of a bonus.
Yeah. Nice. Very good. So with Department of State, you traveled a lot. You've obviously talked about Moscow already. Can you talk to us about some other places you've been and kind of what you were responsible for there?
Well, and like in the diplomatic corps of a lot of countries, is that you can work in the home country. The equivalent's like the Foreign Office in the UK.
Okay.
But if you're in the professional service, you would be posted to different embassies or consulates worldwide to also do the similar work.
Right.
So after 2 or 3 years in Washington, they sent me to New Delhi, India. So I was doing security work in all the embassies and consulates in South Asia.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
and once you're there, things can be sort of ho hum. I mean, India is kind of an interesting place, but it's a little tough as far as not drinking the water and not
Yep.
hitting the cattle with your automobiles, that type of thing. But there's interesting thing. People come and go, and so let's see. People ask if I have stories, and it's like, well, Christmas came along, and Mother Teresa visited the embassy in New Delhi and spoke, and then lit up our Christmas tree. So
Amazing.
yeah, and through this complicated story, Harrison Ford was invited with security types to go to a gun range and shoot Uzis and shotguns and tear gas, and
Wow.
so I got to do that. He was in the area. His wife was filming a documentary.
Okay.
So that's his connection. It wasn't during like one of the Indiana Jones movies, right?
Okay.
But it
Very
was
interesting.
There's danger too. I mean, like Nepal was kind of in upheaval at one point, and they were really concerned one of the security alarms wasn't working. So they flew me in and whisked me to the embassy, and I'm checking the alarm, and no lights, and then I'm checking the power supply, no lights, and I find the power, and it goes to a mains plug, which was unplugged from the wall. And it's like, was it plugged into the wall in the first place? But why is it unplugged? And it's like, the administrative person said I needed to plug in my typewriter. And it's like,
oh no.
So I asked them to turn off the circuit breaker so they could hardwire it into the building mains.
Do it properly, yeah. Well done.
Yeah, and they couldn't find it. So I said, you're just going to have to wire it in hot. And it's like, well, that's dangerous. And it's like, that's as dangerous as the work that was going on next door. They had just two bare copper wires conducting mains power to power something else temporarily. That was their extension cord, is two bare copper wires hammered to a piece of wood. So
scary stuff.
It got done, and I flew out, and that was that.
Yeah, fair enough. Well done.
So from India, they were going to send me to Prague as a reward, but then Czechoslovakia broke up into two countries, and the position was no longer there. So I had to quickly try to find somewhere else, and Sofia, Bulgaria was open, and it was just after communism, and it was a little on the rough side. So I flew there for not very long, it turned out, because I started feeling sick. So they flew me to London for a couple of weeks worth of tests. And
for medical reasons to London, was that?
Yes.
Okay.
And I found London very nice, and I liked London, but I wasn't able to enjoy it to my fullest because I wasn't feeling well. But they diagnosed me with lymphoma, cancer of the blood.
Wow.
So they flew me and my family back to the States, and I underwent chemotherapy.
And so, I presume you made it through, and you fought and won?
Yes, 28 years ago.
Well done. That's fantastic.
I shouldn't say that. It kind of dates me. But,
no.
I did. It was tough, but I got through it. And after some recovery, State Department sent me to Helsinki, Finland, where I ultimately stayed for 4 years, which is a little longer than usual. And it's rather cold, and it can get either very light. You go to the cinema in the evening, and you get out at 11 p.m. and you could swear it was like 6 o'clock in the evening. Everybody's at the cafe sipping the cappuccino and the light in the sky, and you're kind of going, wow, everything's going. But then in the middle of the winter, the sun rises about 9:30 a.m. and sets about 3 p.m.
Right.
So you hardly see it. And then it's very low to the
amazing. I must experience it one day. My brother's lived there for a few years recently, and it's sounds like a different place, I think, is probably what I call it at the moment. But,
we took a train up to the Arctic Circle, and that was kind of fun. They have a amusement park built into inside of a mountain, which was a bomb shelter.
Okay.
And then they have reindeer and their version of Santa Claus named Yolupuki.
Okay.
So it's quite fun.
Interesting. Very cool. So by the end of your career with the Department of State, can you give us sort of an idea of where you were positioned, what you were up to?
Sure. Near the end, I was assigned to Washington. Excuse me, let's go back just a little. I was assigned to Frankfurt, Germany, and I was managing all the technical security for Europe. And I had 2 or 3 trips to the UK to visit our counterparts. And then they sent me to Washington, and I was put in charge of a group that provided special security, mainly in places that had war-torn type stuff, skirmishes going on, and they needed extra levels of security. In previous decades, they would just kind of bug out, like Vietnam, where you saw the helicopters and they're evacuating people. But they're staying quite a bit, and they're just hardening things, and hopefully the military is close by. So I was managing 500 people, and we had a budget of $261 million to accomplish that.
Well done. That's quite an undertaking to be at the top of that structure.
Yeah, it was, it's civil service wages, not a fraction of the money, but yes, it's a lot of responsibility, but it's good fun and seeing everything be accomplished well.
Yeah, fantastic. And so at this point, I think we were talking earlier, and you mentioned that you sort of got a little bit itchy and wanted to get more back involved with the technical stuff, the electronics things.
About 2013, I wanted to get back into more like the digital electronics. I mean, I still had an interest. I was kind of scratching that, playing with PCs over the years, souping them up and that type of thing. But I found Arduino, like a lot of people do. And, I built my first Arduino project, and it was like, okay, I've got now like a water sensor project from my basement. But I'm done, and it's like I don't have an Arduino anymore because it's water in the basement. And at that time, our Arduinos were costing between $30 and $35, which now can buy a Raspberry Pi,
or a lot of Arduinos.
Yeah. Well, so I was looking for a lower cost board, and I came across the Adafruit Trinket. And it was running at that time only about $10. It's been lower price as the years gone on, and it was kind of when it was new, and I was doing some things that people hadn't done before. You had to kind of tweak certain things to get servos and some of the other stuff going, because the microcontroller is kind of like an Arduino, but not. And it has fewer capabilities, so you have to change things around a bit.
So what was the microcontroller on there? Because Arduino historically was sort of the 80 mega AVR type processors.
So this is an AVR too. It's the AT-Tiny 85.
Okay, right.
So
the little baby one.
Yeah. So it does a lot of the same stuff, but the timers are different, and there's a severe RAM restriction, and the flash memory is restricted too. So but you can still, a lot of projects don't require a lot of resources, temperature sensing, servos, and various things. So I started making things, and that caught Adafruit's attention, and they said, why don't you write a tutorial or two on these projects? And it's like, okay. So I started ad hoc, made sure with State Department that was okay to have this.
Okay, so it's still working there and
Yeah.
doing this along the side kind of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I was doing tutorials on the Adafruit learning system. Well, the Trinket and the projects caught the eye of Make, like Make Magazine and Maker Faire and that type of thing. So they asked Adafruit to write a book, and Adafruit said, we're busy making cool electronics. We don't have time to write a book. So they said, well, Anne is doing a lot of Trinket stuff. Why don't you ask her? And they asked me, and I said yes, not knowing quite what I was getting into. But doing the diplomatic stuff, I was used to writing. You have to, in the government, you write a lot. So this is my first book, getting started with Adafruit Trinket.
Very good.
It's still available, but I don't think it's generally being printed anymore. There's a lot of other nice, inexpensive electronics, it turns out, since the 2014 era.
Okay. I was going to ask when that was published, but you said 2014. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was at Maker Faire 2014. I flew from Germany to New York on an A380 and gave a good presentation, met some people, and so I wrote the book, and it did okay, and I continued writing tutorials, but they started branching out from the Trinket. About 2016, well, about 2015, I think, the Adafruit came out with the Circuit Playground based on the Atmega 32U4. And then, let's see, they came out with the Circuit Playground Express, which has more sensors and gosh, my memory's even failing me. So about which processors were in which boards.
Oh, don't worry too much. Yeah.
So classic. Okay, there we go. It says on the back of the board. Yes, it's a AT-SAM-D21.
Okay.
That's right. So that was about the time where the SAM series from Atmel was coming out, which was later acquired by Microchip.
Yep.
But this has a lot more power, this controller, than Arduino ever dreamed.
I was going to say the ARM series are big step up from AVR, aren't they? And was that quite daunting for you as a?
No, I mean, from my programming assembly and doing microprocessors, microcontrollers actually seemed like a really neat solution, since it was all contained mostly in one chip. Often, sometimes there's external flash, and there is here this chip between the microcontroller and the USB is a flash chip. And having that much memory, you don't have to program it in Arduino anymore. There's probably a dozen different ways to program Circuit Playground Express. But the one Adafruit really started championing is CircuitPython, which is a branch of MicroPython, made a little easier for beginners.
Okay.
But still very powerful. So I started doing projects with this, and then Make wanted a book on Circuit Playground Express, and 4 years had elapsed, and I'd forgotten what a chore it was to write a book.
Okay.
So I went ahead and wrote a book.
Very well done.
on the Circuit Playground Express. So I mean, again, I go to Maker Faire and show off the book, which wasn't in print yet, so I couldn't autograph any. But this one has turned out to be more popular. This is aimed very much at students and learning things, because it's mostly All there. There's a lot of sensors. There's NeoPixel lights. Um, you can do dozens and dozens of projects with only using the board. And then if you wanted to add external components, you can use alligator clips or solder.
So convenient.
Yeah. And it's proven very popular. So this board is still in production, whereas the original Trinket is not.
Okay.
There's Trinket variations, which are different from the AT Tiny 85, but with chips like the SAM series, then your low end becomes things like the Atmega 328 and the 32 U4. Those become more like the bargain chips. And then, of course, everything's exploded. There's Microchip came out with the SAMD51, which is kind of like the heavyweight. And a lot of other companies like Raspberry Pi, on the heels of the success with the Pi series, have come out with the Pico and the RP2040 chip. And that's amazing that the price point versus what it does. I mean, it doesn't have all the peripherals of maybe a SAMD51, but it's got PIO, which you can...
I was going to say it's very powerful. Yeah.
Yes.
People have done silly things with that.
Incredible things. Output video or emulate an entire Spectrum computer with just a microcontroller chip instead of using a microprocessor and the RAM and ROM and all the peripherals. It's brilliant. So that's what I like is, it's kind of following Moore's law that you've got more powerful chips coming out, and the price has been dropping. So, I mean, you get a Raspberry Pi Pico now for $4 versus when I was talking about Arduino Uno back in 2013 at $30.
Yeah. So, it's amazing, isn't it?
It is. So when I was considering leaving the State Department at the end of my career, about 30 years, Adafruit invited me up to New York, and we had dinner and saw the Museum of Modern Art and stuff. And then over dinner, it's like, would you like to work for Adafruit? It's like, oh yeah, sure.
Now there's an offer.
Yeah, that was a great offer. I mean, I could have likely stayed working on the sidelines of the State Department, but I'd done that, and I wanted something that I was really passionate about, and working with electronics and using my skills was something that fit the bill.
That's fantastic. So you've obviously done these books, and you were writing up projects for the learning system with Adafruit or Adafruit. Apologies, I've spoken to a few of your colleagues now, and I keep noticing I keep saying it wrong, so I apologize.
No worries.
Am I right in thinking that you're quite keen on sort of sharing knowledge with others and promoting learning and getting the word out there, or is that kind of something that's happened almost by mistake?
Oh, no. For me personally, it's something I like to do. I published a lot of information when I was doing my diplomatic career, stuff on electronics and how to get things done. And I was heading up logistics, and I kind of revamped how people were able to go online and get information about parts, when something like Amazon.com was kind of ramping up their book selling. And it's like, yeah, people should be able to, browse what they might need similar to Amazon. So I did that. And then a little bit later in my career, it's like, well, there's a lot of tradecraft, they call it. I mean, a lot to learn. They have an excellent teaching facility for the American Diplomatic Corps called the National Foreign Affairs Training Center in Northern Virginia. but you have to take classes. It's very much like a university. You take classes to learn certain aspects, and the practical knowledge one might get too, along with rules and regulations and telegrams and all this vast swarm of information. So at one point they came out, they got WordPress, and they put up a internal WordPress and called it Diplopedia.
Okay.
And I found that, and it's like, that would be a good place to kind of put information, this trade craft. So mostly on my own time, I started kind of populating things, and the IT people noticed, and it was in the mid 20 teens. While I was in Athens, they sent me to Alexandria, Egypt, along with one of their folks, and we gave a presentation at Wikimania on this information sharing. And so I was one of their leading content providers, feeding this information, developing hierarchies and stuff, and other people started using it, and it kind of snowballed as far as a good place to aggregate information about how to be a diplomat, where to find information, the whole thing. So
that's amazing. Well done.
Yeah, well, between that and writing tutorials, it's like it kind of came naturally that I was sharing my information. And the fact that Adafruit, along with other companies, SparkFun, Pimeroni, and or do you say Pimeroni?
I'd say Pimeroni, but
okay, good. All these open source companies, that's what they're doing, is they're providing documentation and oftentimes schematics and various things as open source, so you can know exactly what's going on. I don't
see how it works. You can find out how it works.
Yeah. I don't want to clone this. I'm not a dubious electronics company far away who says I want to make this and charge $2 less and make a killing. I want to know what all the electronics are. And actually, between these two boards, I did a lot of that, is trying to figure out what the electronics are. And then sometimes you want to use the software that's provided to talk to it. And there are other times, just like on the Spectrum and BBC and IBM PC, you want to talk directly to the hardware, and that can often be faster or more advantageous. And it tickles that programming plus hardware kind of thing, which I've had ever since university. So
yeah, brilliant.
So providing information for people is something I really like to do, and Adafruit's given me a great conduit to do that.
Fantastic. Do you mind expanding a little bit on your role at Adafruit? Is that what you do, or do you do sort of other things as well?
I started writing tutorials full time and blogging. Adafruit has a very extensive blog, and that evolved into helping manage the Adafruit learning system. Frees up Lady Ada Lamore Freed to work on designs and that type of thing, which provides new products that everybody loves to see. Also with CircuitPython coming about, we were all learning CircuitPython, and they started a weekly newsletter on CircuitPython, MicroPython, Python on single board computers like Raspberry Pi and Banana Pi and Orange Pi and all the other Pis. And I took that over from Scott Shawcroft, who's the lead developer for CircuitPython, so he could dig down into kernel stuff and all that nitty gritty. And so I published that every week. I scoured the internets for all the latest and greatest. I really want to encourage folks out there that if they're working with Python on any type of hardware, send your projects and news and meetings, everything to cpnews@adafruit.com. And I'll look to see about putting it in our weekly newsletter.
Fantastic.
We're very keen to highlight good work going on out there. The newsletter, it's, there are no ads, there's no spamming of email addresses, there's no like painful leaving process if you don't like it. It's all like on a separate domain, so you don't have to worry that there's some sort of unscrupulousness about joining or leaving or anything, versus these days, unfortunately, you never know if you subscribe to something, what's going to happen to your information.
Who's going to get it? Yeah. Okay, that's brilliant. So I think that might be sort of us up to date on your life then, mostly, somewhat. Can we talk about a couple of projects you're currently working on?
Sure. The first one is trying to recreate a computer that was seen in episode in the classic Star Trek run back in the 60s.
I've got a picture of it here.
That one, yes. It's called the M5. It was meant to like replace the whole crew of a starship, and it kind of goes amok, which there's a lot of plots where the computer runs amok. But so you see the circular display, it kind of shows this cloudy sort of image, and then the rectangular display shows a lot of colored lines. And I don't have this hooked up, unfortunately, and I'm still working on it. But here's my round display, and here is my square display, a rectangular one. And this one will show kind of that cloudy animation. And this one will show various colored lines, and hopefully roughly screen accurate depiction of what Star Trek used.
Fantastic.
So, some people have made replicas, but used like larger panels and maybe not both of the screens at the same time and stuff. I've seen people make miniature whoppers from war games, various little computers, and I want to make something kind of about that size and looks functional, and you have the sound too. I mean, that's one thing I like about microcontrollers is actually pumping out sound. It's very, besides blinky lights, it's a very satisfactory, highly satisfying thing to interact with. So
I always find that when you move something or you beep or whatever, it's that little extra level above a blinking, isn't it?
Some people get annoyed with bleeps and boops and stuff. So there's a methodology, a user experience, what the kids call it these days, to try to make sure you don't do it too much.
Get overwhelmed. Yeah. Okay. So I confess I don't remember or haven't seen this particular computer in use in the show. Is this, I presume, a small model that you're making? And actually, this was sort of a touchscreen, big thing that we're looking at.
Yes, the original one was probably the size of a dining room table, maybe.
Okay.
And mine is more of a miniature model size.
Sure. Okay.
I mean, one could build a bigger one. Unfortunately, I mean, there's a great prevalence of these round displays these days because they're put in watches.
Right.
But you could get a large rectangular display. I'm looking at one right now, and you are too, most likely. But to get a round display
of that size,
maybe 60 centimeters, 70.
Okay. Yeah.
It's nearly impossible. I mean, one could kind of fudge it as far as getting a square rectangular one and kind of hiding the rest, but it wouldn't look like this picture that.
Absolutely. Okay, so what's your plan here? Have you got some way through the development, or is it sort of still conceptual desires?
The round display, I wasn't getting good frame rates under CircuitPython, so Adafruit has a animated GIF. I'm going to say GIF player.
That's fine.
Running under Arduino, and
Okay.
I think that will give acceptable frame rates on the picture. And then I'm running CircuitPython on a separate microcontroller to animate the rectangular part.
Okay.
And that's mostly coded. So it's a matter of finishing up, making sure everything looks right, that I'm getting acceptable display quality, and then to kind of package it up and get the sound going.
Okay.
Sounds pretty easy. I mean, just take a recording from the TV,
Right.
or DVD. Well, actually, to be quite nerdy, I've got a compact disc that was put out commercially. It has all the sound effects from the original Star Trek.
Wow. Okay.
And
That's very cool.
Yeah, for one of my other projects a while back was taking, Adafruit came out with a tactile grid, and it was programmable in CircuitPython or Arduino. And we made soundboards out of them. So my soundboard used Star Trek sounds.
That's awesome.
You could just push the buttons and get all kinds of mixtures of sound effects or somebody talking.
Okay.
And if anybody's interested, that's on the Adafruit Learning System. It's quite a lot of fun.
Do you remember the name of the project for people to search, or
I will,
don't worry too much?
I'll look right now. I'll only take a couple clicks.
Sure.
Star Trek soundboard with Neo Trellis. I wrote it with my colleague Dano Wall.
Feel free if you've got a link to put it in the chat or similar, and
sure.
Yeah, I'll try and bring it into the show notes as well.
Okay, I put it in the private chat, and if you can put it in the comments, then
sure.
Yeah, so has nice colors, and you can see pushing the buttons. I don't know if I actually, well, okay, at the top, there's a YouTube link. You can click that, and
oh. There you go.
Do you have sound?
I don't know. Can you hear that?
I cannot.
Maybe not. No, never mind.
Well, you push the button.
I can hear the noises.
Okay, well, I will play my version. Maybe you can hear.
Oh, sure. It's very quiet if we can. Never mind. I'll include a link for people to go and have a look, and I will put that in the public chat right now as well.
Yeah.
There you go.
So if you have any sort of wish to make cool things, the Adafruit Learning System has over 2,500 tutorials. They're all free, all open source. You can build those, you can mix them up, or you can do anything you want with it, which is brilliant. All you have to do, it's like MIT license, so you have to put Adafruit's name on it somewhere. Axwax says that they built that. And it was great fun there. And you can take that Neo Trellis, and there's other projects too. You just change the software. There was a sequencer, music sequencer built. I believe John Park did it. And I loaded that and gave the Neo Trellis to my wife, and she just loves it. I mean, she's a music person, and she's brilliant herself. She's now working for NASA. And
amazing.
We both live just a few miles south of Kennedy Space Center, so we get to watch all the rockets. And
wow.
She works on the Artemis program, so when that rocket went up in mid-November, she was down in the bowels of a control room making sure the thing didn't catch fire. and I'd gotten an invitation to be in what's called NASA Social, is to be a media person, live blogging and doing that.
Oh, amazing. Yeah.
And so I had a front row seat,
Very good.
close enough to be blown up if it had gone the wrong way.
Turn your life away type stuff.
So, I mean, I get to play with electronics. I get to see rockets.
Yeah.
I get to play with vintage computers. That's my
Yeah, I was
other
going to
project.
come on and ask about that as well. So do you want to expand on that one?
Yeah. Again, at Caltech, we started using the early luggable PCs like Compaq and IBM had. And the first computer I bought, the first real computer, I was talking to you, and I have to take that back. I did buy a Radio Shack color computer, but using a cassette deck to do programs was just very discouraging.
That doesn't count in your mind, is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I bought a compact desktop,
Okay.
the first one they came out with, and did a lot of programming and tinkering and souping up computers was kind of my hobby when I didn't have electronics around. And so this kind of harkens back to those days in the 80s when an AT class machine came out at about $6,000.
Mm-hmm.
So now you can get an untested one for $300 and start kind of souping it up, just like one might do with a car or something. So
amazing.
Put a 3.5 inch and a 5 1/4. Add more
Sure
RAM,
is,
put VGA card in it, and have fun. And then try to figure out all of the bonus electronics. This is a really neat token ring card that came in the PC, and I've never seen a card quite like it. With it almost looks like a breadboard.
I was going to say, is that a proto board type thing, or is that actually
no?
sort of a
It's an actual
product?
production product.
Wow. Okay.
Back when token ring was a multi conductor cable versus Ethernet now, with its easy to plug in stuff. So I'm sure this board was quite expensive back in the day, but it's not really useful because no one is building that level of network. I really like reviving the technology and souping it up with maybe a few modern parts, but I'm not going to recreate that ancient network. It's just a little beyond where I want to go.
I was about to ask if you'd have any interest in doing that.
I've got an Ethernet card, an 8-bit Ethernet card in there right now, and get MS-DOS and Windows 3.1 to talk to an Ethernet card was an experience in itself. The next version of Windows after the one I have on here is Windows 3.11, or Windows for Workgroups. That had very easy networking capabilities, but it didn't run on a 286 machine. It only ran on a 386 or higher. Right. So, you're kind of stuck with software wise, but that's kind of the fun, is to try to tinker with the software to get it working to a certain level.
So you've been working to put this computer back together and bring it to life again, bring it sort of soup it up, as you say. So what sort of things have you been through, and where are you at the moment?
I got the mystery box and checked out what cards were in it. I also got a second AT, also kind of a mystery, and they both kind of complemented each other in what parts they had. Like the 3.5 inch drive was in the other one, and a memory card. And so I've kind of Frankenstein them both to get the best parts in here. The hardest part was software, trying to get there's like an obscure setup diskette that is required for an AT, apparently, to get it to recognize the hardware.
Okay.
So reading online on trying to get that done, and use in the background here, I've got a 386. No, I'm sorry. It's a Pentium 3 machine, which does okay with 5 1/4 inch floppies still. So I could kind of make diskettes and then use them to the older machine, because this machine that I'm coming to you on is not
No
very
chance.
floppy friendly.
It's so sad, isn't it?
So it's getting software, say, off the internet and getting it to a Pentium 3 and then burning a disk that this can use.
Yeah.
And then the hard drives didn't work, so I had to get a simulated hard drive with a compact flash card, which the enthusiasts have developed.
Okay.
But then you have to get it formatted and looking like a hard drive, and the steps to do it are non-trivial. So I've documented that all on my blog, and
amazing.
links in my if you can see my Twitter handle there. I'm also Ann B at octodon.social. On Mastodon, you can see where I've linked in my blog. And you can check out some posts I made on working on the PC.
That's fantastic. So are these hard drives with a IDE? So it, a compact flash card adapter was.
No, these are before IDE.
I wasn't quite sure when that sort of happened.
Yeah, so I will actually grab one real quick. This is a half height. They call it an MFM drive.
Okay. Yep.
The original ones had an MFM interface that was also kind of keyed into the floppy controller, except it has an extra cable attached to it. The second one I got with the other AT has a full height drive, and that's a beast. But is
that full height to have more platters, or is there something else going on there?
Usually, but I mean, the older ones, I mean, they started being able to get platters closer together with heads thinner.
Okay.
I worked summers at Hewlett Packard when I was at Whitman, and we built hard disks for HP computers. And the technology, hard disk technology, is a whole nother thing that we could go into. But so unfortunately, the controller I have in this machine right now is an IDE controller. It's hooked to an interface that interfaces into a compact flash card. Although if I had an IDE drive, I could probably put it in there, but then I'd have the software issue of trying to get it all formatted and booted and everything.
I see. Okay. Oh, amazing. So you've got that. You've got. I think you mentioned earlier you got DOS and Windows 3.1 up and running.
Yeah.
Is that sort of to a usable point now? You're happy with it, or is there more to go?
I'm probably at the point that that I need to take it and make sure it's all clean and nice, and I'd like to add some more memory to it. I mean, I've got a mouse hooked up to it, which again, for the older computers, it wasn't just a plug-in on the back. You have to add in a separate card, which takes a mouse, or maybe on the serial port.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember serial port mice, and you had to sort of run the driver, tell it what port to look at. It's amazing.
Exactly.
Oh,
so there's all kinds of struggles with each little thing to go from one to the other to get it going. I mean, it almost makes something like the BBC Micro look as a package, as a well-tuned package compared to restoring an old computer. I mean, if you bought this new, it was all set up and ready to go.
Right.
But not having been running for the last, who knows, 20, 30 years, it needs a certain level of care and understanding to get it back.
Yeah, fair enough. Fantastic. That's I have a sort of a soft spot for the older technology like that, and it's just nice to see it working. So well done.
Thank you.
Very good. I think we might be nearly about time. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about or shout out before we say goodbye to everybody?
I'm not trying to commercialize things, but if you like some of the technology I've been discussing, you can go to adafruit.com. And they've got a lot of open source stuff there. I mean, you don't have to buy anything to check out all the cool electronics and learning stuff. I work a lot with CircuitPython, and you can check that out at circuitpython.org. Again, it's all open source free. It's all on GitHub. If you wanted to to take it apart and check under the hood, it's all there. If you go to adafruitdaily.com, you can subscribe to the Python and Microcontrollers newsletter. Comes out every Tuesday on email, and I gather a lot of good information. You might want to check it out.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Anne, for joining us this week.
That's been a pleasure.
It's been wonderful talking. And aside from that, it's goodbye from us. Next week we'll be talking with Joe Grand. But yeah, farewell.
Thanks.